She was dismissed the moment she stepped into the Voss estate. A white cardigan softened by time, a linen skirt creased from the drive, a cloth bag stitched with initials only one man had ever recognized. Her silver hair was neatly tucked behind her ears, and her shoes made no sound on the imported stone tiles. Just enough to be overlooked. Just enough to draw side eyes from a room full of legacy hunters dressed like a Forbes cover shoot. A young woman in a body-hugging blazer glanced up from her phone, blinked twice, then turned to her friend and whispered without whispering, "Is that housekeeping?" Another replied, "Maybe catering's mom dropped in." They laughed, sharp and quiet, but not quiet enough. Maye Musk didn't answer. She didn't look their way. She adjusted the strap of her bag and walked toward a chair near the far wall, a shadowed corner under a painting of Jonathan Voss in front of his first AI lab. The room belonged to his name now, not his memory. But Maye remembered every flaw in that portrait, his right shoulder too stiff, the eyes too cold. The real Jonathan was warmer, complex, human. She sat down gently, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. Across the room, Carla Voss, Jonathan's much younger partner and self-appointed widow, stood by the marble bar counter. She wore tailored black-like armor, diamond studs that caught the morning sun, and a smirk that said everything was under control. Her fingers danced across her phone. Kelsey Nguyen leaned in, screen already recording. "When someone's grandma crashes the will reading," Kelsey murmured, lips curling. "Caption this, #cringenergy." The live went up instantly. Behind them, a cluster of 20-somethings watched the video spread, like gasoline meeting fire. No one asked who the woman in the video was. No one cared. In that house, you were either on the list or in the way. A few older guests turned their heads but said nothing. A pair of attorneys glanced toward the doorway, confused but unwilling to get involved. Maye had made sure of that. Carla looked at Maye as if noticing a misplaced object, then turned back to the bar and said just loud enough, "Housekeeping staff shouldn't cross into the reception hall." A man next to her chuckled. Another added, "Well, at least she's dressed for it." No one stopped them. A tall waiter in a black vest passed by, carrying a silver tray of mineral water and rosemary crackers. He didn't see Maye until the edge of the tray brushed her shoulder, sloshing a splash of cold liquid across her lap. He glanced down, blinked, and moved on. No apology. Not even a word. The chill spread through the linen as slowly as the silence in the room. Eyes turned. Some curious. Some amused. One woman tilted her head as if trying to remember where she'd seen that face. A distant memory, perhaps. A photo. A scandal. A whisper. But Maye said nothing. She looked down at the wet patch growing across her skirt. Her fingers found the edge of her cloth bag, the stitching along the hem, small, careful letters, MHV. The initials that had once been embroidered into her wedding handkerchief. She didn't dab the water. Didn't rise. Didn't flinch. She sat as if the room weren't turning inward. As if their laughter and confusion hadn't already placed her outside of belonging. In the corner, a red light blinked from a small black dome mounted in the ceiling. One of the estate's discreet security cameras. Streaming live. Recording everything. No one noticed it. But Maye had. And she was still waiting. The buzz in the room shifted. Not louder, just sharper. Laughter that curled at the edges. Kelsey Nguyen stood in perfect lighting beneath the bay window, her camera angled high, filters ready. Carla Voss posed beside her, holding a mock handkerchief to her face with exaggerated grief. "This one's for the trend," Kelsey said, grinning. #Voss Widow Challenge. Act like you just found out you're not in the will. 3, 2, go. Carla collapsed dramatically onto a velvet chair, wailing with fake sobs, clutching an empty bottle of sparkling water as if it were a shattered dream. The group behind them howled. A chorus of perfectly timed cackles. The video went up in seconds. "When you show up dressed like the ex-wife and think you're getting $1 billion, Kelsey read aloud, laughing as she typed. "Tag your grandma. #thriftcore. #not invited." Phones lit up across the room. The screen glow reflected off wine glasses and polished jewelry. A few younger guests turned to stare at Maye, not in curiosity, but in search of inspiration. Another angle. Another joke. Bradley Voss, slouched against the mantel with one foot on a low table, smirked. She thinks she's Elon Musk's ex, he said, voice just loud enough to slice through conversation. What's next? Claims she built the garage startup. A few people snorted. One man actually clapped. Another muttered, maybe she wandered in from the nursing home down the road. Still, Maye didn't move. Her eyes lifted briefly to a photograph above the fireplace. Jonathan, maybe 35, standing in front of his first Voitech prototype. Behind him, shelves of servers and wires, everything makeshift, nothing sleek. That photo had been hers. She'd taken it with trembling fingers the night he signed his first patent. His collar had been crooked. She'd told him to fix it. He hadn't. Now the glass on the frame caught the chandelier light in strange ways. The dust of a decade blurred the edges. She blinked once, then returned her gaze to her lap. Across the room, the volume dipped and rose like a tide. One woman joked about Maye's shoes. Another zoomed in on her bag. The comments online were growing. Who even is she? Thrift store vibes. Plot twist. She's here for the free lunch. Maye's hands remained steady. Kelsey whispered to Carla, she hasn't looked at us once. That's because she knows, Carla replied, smiling. No one like her walks into a room like this without knowing exactly where the walls are. There was a pause. Just a sliver of silence in the noise. A young server, barely more than a boy, approached from the side. His hands trembled slightly as he refilled a glass. He glanced at Maye, then looked away. Then looked again. He leaned toward her quietly. Would you like some tea? He asked. His voice was soft, careful. I could bring it to you. The kitchen's just down the hall. Maye turned to him slowly. Their eyes met. It was only for a second, but it was enough. He didn't smile. She didn't nod. But something passed between them. Something not loud enough to interrupt the room, but stronger than it. She said nothing. The boy hesitated, then bowed his head and stepped back. No one noticed him. No one cared. But the camera in the corner did. The red light blinked once, then again. It caught the angle of Carla's fake sobs. The shimmer of Kelsey's phone. The way Bradley pointed. The shift of the crowd as they turned laughter into sport. And it caught Maye. Still. Waiting. A woman no one recognized. But soon, no one would forget. The laughter had changed. It wasn't louder, just lazier, mean in a relaxed sort of way, like cruelty had become a game and the rules were simple. Whoever made the quiet woman crack first, won. Bradley Voss paced behind the guests like a restless dog, sipping champagne he hadn't paid for and didn't appreciate. His velvet blazer caught in the sunlight from the high windows, flashing gold threads as he leaned against a credenza near Maye's chair. He tilted his head at her as if inspecting an antique no one remembered buying. Then, with a glance around to be sure no one official was looking, he reached for a name tag from the table of unclaimed guests. With a Sharpie pilfered from someone's clipboard, he scribbled 2 words in block letters. Charity guest. He peeled the back and stepped toward Maye. Her gaze was turned to the window, watching the clouds shift in the glass. She didn't see him approach. Didn't flinch when he bent slightly behind her and stuck the label to the upper edge of her cardigan. He walked away grinning. Laughter followed him like perfume. A group near the hors d'oeuvres table noticed first. One of the girls nudged her friend and whispered, too loud to be kind. The sticker. Look. That's brutal. Another pulled out her phone. Behind Maye, the words now fluttered with every small breath she took. Kelsey saw the moment and lit up. She lifted her phone and hit record. New challenge, she whispered to the camera. Find the most out-of-place person at the will reading. Loser buys brunch. She angled the lens to include Carla adjusting her neckline, Bradley pretending to hold a violin to his chin, and finally, Maye, alone, sticker on her back, eyes unfocused. The comments began pouring in within seconds. She looks homeless, give her a broom already, this is giving Dollar Tree mystic. Kelsey laughed aloud at that one and turned to Carla. She's gone viral. Look at this. 10,000 views already. Careful, Carla replied, sipping her mimosa. She might ask for a cut. Not unless it's coupons. They laughed harder. Maye hadn't moved. She sat with the same stillness she had when she entered, but now there was something in the air around her, something different. Her silence was no longer passive. It had edges. Kelsey noticed it too. And like anyone who grows bold off the roar of an audience they can't see, she moved closer. One step, then another. Phone raised, thumb steady on the record button. She stopped just 2 feet from Maye's chair. The older woman hadn't looked up. Not yet. Kelsey leaned in, too close for comfort, voice high and sugary. Smile for TikTok, Grandma. The room paused. Not all of it. Not completely. But the laughter dimmed. A few people turned their heads. Bradley smirked behind his glass. Carla didn't even blink. Maye's fingers tightened slightly on the strap of her bag. Then, for the first time, she looked up. Her eyes met Kelsey's phone, then Kelsey's eyes behind it. There was no anger. No pity. No retreat. Just looking. Direct. Unbroken. Unapologetic. It lasted longer than it should have. Kelsey's grin faltered just slightly. Her phone dipped a fraction. "Come on," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Still, Maye said nothing. And in that silence, something shifted. Not in the crowd, they were too busy checking comments and sipping drinks, but in the room itself. Like a temperature drop that only one person notices before the storm comes in. A breeze through a sealed house. A weight moving. The camera in the corner blinked once. Then zoomed. It caught the sticker. The glassy look in Kelsey's eyes. The exact second Maye's gaze met hers and did not let go. No one else noticed. But something had changed. Not loudly. Not publicly. Not yet. But it had begun. The grand doors creaked open at precisely 10 o'clock. Conversation dropped into a hush as Charles Dreyfus entered the room, flanked by a junior associate and carrying a steel-grey briefcase with a single worn leather handle. His suit was 3 shades darker than his expression, and his steps made no sound against the marble. Everyone knew who he was. The executor of Jonathan Voss's final affairs. The man who held the words they'd flown cross-country to hear. He set the briefcase on the oak table in front of the fireplace. The latch snapped open like a starter's pistol. No greetings. No introductions. Only a pause. Then, quietly but clearly, Charles spoke. "This is the last will and testament of Jonathan Ezra Voss. Dated and notarized February 3rd, 2 years ago. Confirmed valid under the laws of New York State." Chairs shifted. Phones were silenced. Eyes locked forward. Maye did not move. Charles opened a cream-colored envelope sealed with a wax insignia. He unfolded the paper slowly, smoothing the edges, letting the silence thicken before he began. "To my partners, colleagues, and extended family," he read, his voice firm but without warmth. "I leave no stock, no shares, no titles, no assets. What I built with one person. What I leave with her." People froze. No one breathed. Charles looked up briefly, just enough to scan the crowd, before reading again. "To Maye Musk Voss, my legal wife, my co-founder, the woman who helped me build Wojtek from the floor of a rented garage in Santa Fe, I leave the entirety of my estate, intellectual and financial, with no contest or condition." There was a full second of silence. Then, "What the hell?" Bradley's voice cracked across the room like a thrown glass. He stood, wide-eyed, staring at the lawyer. He wasn't married. He told me he was divorced. He said he hadn't spoken to his ex in years. Carla stood too. Not speaking, not blinking. Charles reached calmly into his briefcase and withdrew a framed photograph. He held it up for the room to see. It showed Jonathan Voss in a dark gray suit, standing barefoot in the dust of a New Mexico courthouse. Beside him stood a woman in a white blouse and soft skirt, her silver blonde hair pinned back, a smile on her face and desert sun in her eyes. They were holding hands. A witness signed the corner of the frame. The date etched in small ink, June 17, 2005. Kelsey blinked at the photo. Then at Maye. "Wait," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's her?" Carla finally found her voice. "This has to be staged." "He told me," he said. "I was the closest person to him. This is fraud." The young associate beside Charles leaned forward and handed over a folder. Inside were copies of the marriage certificate, notarized financial statements from joint accounts, emails, even handwritten letters. Charles glanced at her with faint detachment. All verified. All legally binding. Witnessed and filed. A man in the back swore under his breath. A woman clutched her pearls. Someone knocked over a glass. Maye was still seated. Still watching. But her fingers had released the strap of her bag. Across the room, Carla took a half step forward. "No. This isn't over. He would have told me. I managed his schedule. I was there when Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look up. He simply said, cold and flat, 'Please sit down. Mrs. Voss has not yet spoken.' For a long moment, no one moved. Not even Maye. The weight of the room hung heavy, suspended like a held breath. Then, slowly, she rose. Her motion was deliberate, not rushed. One hand on the armrest, the other brushing the side of her cardigan. She stood tall, not stiff, not frail, but steady. The white of her blouse caught the sunlight from the window behind her, casting a faint glow around the edges of her shoulders. Her fingers still trembled slightly, but her eyes did not. She walked forward. No heels clicking. No dramatic flourish. Just soft footfalls crossing polished marble as heads turned one by one. Someone shifted in their chair. Someone else coughed. She stopped in the center of the room, beside the oak table, across from the woman in black and the man with the smirk. The silence was brittle. Maye looked straight ahead. "I didn't come here for money." Her voice was quiet, but it filled the space. "I came to see who remembered Jonathan. Not the empire. Not the shares. Not the headlines. Just Jonathan." Her gaze turned to Carla, who stared back with narrowed eyes and tight lips. "You," she said, pointing gently without gesture. "You loved his calendar. Not his chaos. His meetings. Not his midnight calls when he couldn't sleep. You knew how to rearrange his week. But you never asked how he spent his Sundays." Carla looked away. Maye turned to Kelsey next. "You know his face from Google alerts. I knew it from the hospital room. From the night he collapsed in our kitchen because he'd skipped meals to finish a pitch deck. I knew the tremble in his hands before any doctor did." Kelsey's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her phone was still in her lap. She didn't dare lift it. Bradley shifted in his seat, arms folded, ready to scoff. "And you," she said softly, but firmly. "Jonathan once called you a public liability. I asked him not to put that in writing. He said you'd never read the board minutes anyway." Bradley's jaw twitched. "Check the third quarter transcript," she added. Page 6. A single laugh escaped from someone near the back. It died quickly. Maye looked around the room. At the hands suddenly folded. At the eyes dodging hers. "You came here for what you thought was left behind. But you never once asked who was left behind. No one moved. You want the company, the property, the shares. But none of you asked who held Jonathan's hand when the ventilator beeped for 5 straight minutes last year. Who cancelled her own lecture tour to sit beside him for 14 days. Who read him his own code aloud because he said it calmed his mind. Silence. Not a reverent one. A cornered one." She turned back to Charles. "I don't need proof," she said. "But I brought it anyway." From the side pocket of her cloth bag, she pulled a folded letter. The edges were worn, the ink faint at the corners. She handed it to Charles, who opened it and scanned it quickly. He looked up, then nodded. "Would you read it, please?" Maye asked. Charles cleared his throat. Then read aloud. "If I'm gone, and Maye is there, trust her silence more than any will. She's the only one who never needed anything from me but time." Maye stood still. And suddenly, the room no longer felt like a war zone. It felt like a reckoning. No one noticed Charles walking to the far end of the room. Not until the faint click of a remote control echoed through the silence. A large monitor, built discreetly into the wall behind the fireplace, blinked on. The screen was dim at first. Then it came into focus. A wooden cabin. Soft amber light. Books stacked in uneven piles. A window cracked just enough to let in the wind. And there, seated calmly at a desk made of unfinished pine, was Jonathan Voss. Alive. Gasps erupted like glass shattering on marble. Someone dropped a drink. Someone else whispered no under their breath. He looked older. Leaner. His dark hair was streaked with silver. A long scar traced the line from his left temple to his ear. But his eyes, those unmistakable eyes, were clear. Cold. Watching. Good morning, vultures. The words landed with surgical precision. Carla stumbled backward into the armrest behind her. This can't be legal, she barked, voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. This has to be AI. A deep fake. Something. Jonathan didn't blink. It's live. It's public. And it's judgment. He leaned slightly forward. His fingers were steepled in front of him. Calm. Measured. Ready. You thought I was gone. You thought I left you a blank check and a playground. You thought the last thing I built would be yours to devour. He paused. But I've been here. Watching. Listening. He reached off screen and picked up a printout. This, he said, lifting it into view, is from Kelsey's little TikTok stunt. He read aloud, word for word. When someone's grandma crashes the wall reading, #cringeenergy. A few people in the room turned their heads toward her. Kelsey shrank in her seat. Her phone slid from her hand and landed softly against her knee. Jonathan set the paper down. And this one, from 30 minutes ago. Captioned Thrift Store Widow. That's clever. Ugly, but clever. His eyes narrowed. She warned me. She said you'd strip my name from my bones the second you smelled blood in the water. And you did. Carla stepped forward again, flailing. You faked your own death. That's criminal. That's necessary. Jonathan interrupted. I needed to see the rot. I needed to know who loved me and who loved my will. And now I do. Behind him, wind moved the curtain just slightly. A log shifted in a fireplace we couldn't see. Somewhere, the echo of a bird call cut across the feed. Maye stood behind the table, still as stone. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She had known. Somehow, she had known all along. Jonathan looked straight into the camera. To the partners who sold my secrets the week after the crash. To the family who measured my absence in stock percentages. To the friends who became auctioneers of my legacy. You failed the test. He breathed once, slow and deep. You mocked the only person who never asked me for anything. You tried to humiliate her. Turn her into content. Into a joke. But you forgot something. His tone dropped. She helped me write this script. He reached down again, picked up one final page. And she was right about all of you. The screen froze on his face, stern, illuminated, unwavering. Then he said, low and final, this isn't a comeback. It's a sentence. The room stayed frozen for a beat too long. Then Charles, steady as ever, lifted a new sheet of paper from the table. His voice, calm and unshaken, sliced clean through the silence. Per Mr. Voss's instructions, and pursuant to Clause 9 of his final directive, the following individuals are hereby disinherited, removed from all claims, and barred from any further legal or financial involvement with the estate of Jonathan Ezra Voss. He paused only for air. Carla Voss. Her knees buckled slightly. She didn't sit. Didn't stand. Just hovered between denial and collapse. Bradley Voss. He let out a curse, sharp and desperate, but no one moved to stop Charles. Kelsey Nguyen. She gasped. Not theatrically, but in real panic, her hands shaking as she reached for her phone. Notifications were already lighting up. Emails from sponsors. Contract terminations. A follow account that once pulsed with validation now bleeding numbers by the second. For others followed, Names that barely made it to the end of Charles's breath before the room felt like it was breaking apart from within. Carla lunged forward. "You can't do this. Jonathan. You loved me. I was there. I held your business together. I built your brand." The screen didn't reply. Kelsey stumbled toward May, dropping to her knees, voice cracking through a whisper. "Please. I didn't mean it. It was just for the algorithm. People laugh. They forget. Please tell him." May looked at her. Just looked. Not cruel. Not angry. Just quiet. She didn't speak. Didn't reach. Didn't soften. And somehow, that silence crushed louder than any scream. Kelsey's voice fractured again. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." May blinked once. "Exactly," she said. Behind them, Charles continued reading final directives. Legal closures. Asset transfers. None of it touched the bone like the silence in that center of the room. Security moved gently but firmly, escorting Carla, Bradley, and the others toward the doors. Some protested. Some didn't bother. All were ignored. As Kelsey passed the threshold, her phone buzzed one last time and then went dark. Her digital kingdom evaporated mid-step. When the room emptied, only a few remained. A junior developer who hadn't spoken all morning. A groundskeeper in a faded blue shirt. And Eli, the estate's gatekeeper for nearly 3 decades, who had quietly stepped into the back of the room sometime during the chaos. May turned to him. "Thank you," she said, "for opening the door without asking my name." Eli nodded, eyes wet, one hand pressed to his chest. Jonathan's voice returned through the screen, this time softer. "To those who stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of grace, you are seen. You are remembered. And you are part of what comes next." Then the screen blinked off. Jonathan was gone again. But this time, the silence he left behind didn't feel empty. It felt clean. May turned, her cardigan catching the breeze from an open window. She walked slowly toward the French doors at the end of the hall. They opened without resistance. Outside, the garden glowed with early afternoon light. The peach tree Jonathan had planted a decade ago stood in full bloom. Pale petals fluttered like memories on the wind. May stepped into the sun, shoes sinking just slightly into the softened earth. She didn't look back. Because there was nothing left behind her worth holding. Only what had been right all along. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's proof you never needed to shout to be right.